the Ampatuans basically ran the Muslim areas as their own private fiefdom. All right? But by about 2009, it was looking like things were beginning to settle down in the Muslim South. However, in 2009, you had the Maguindanao massacre, in which the Ampatuan family massacred the female members of a rival clan and several dozen journalists, Philippine journalists. All right? This raised such a hue and cry, such levels of resentment, and such a protest against basically complete and total impunity in the Muslim South for the Ampatuan dynasty, that the dynasty, it didn't entirely collapse, but it had to loosen its hold on the province. It lost control of the province. And after a decade, literally a decade, of very tight control by a single family, everyone starts scrambling for the now available resources. And we begin to see this destabilization rear its head again. All right? There are encouraging signs, but there are also very worrying signs at the same time. In 2014, there was a major milestone when the government of the Philippines signed a peace treaty with the MILF and instituted the, by 2014 at least, they instituted the Bangsamoro Basic Law, which de facto would have given the ARMM full-scale autonomy. Independence in all but name, if you like, with a common foreign policy and voting rights and so forth, but nevertheless. All right? It looked like this was about to happen, but then again, in January of 2015, the Mama Sapano massacre occurs. 44 Special Action Force policemen are killed in an ambush. Again, the details are complex. I could discuss that later if you like, how this massacre unfolds. But certain Christian demagogue politicians in Manila use this massacre to discredit the passage of the BBL, the Bangsamoro Basic Law. And then we have the election of Rodrigo Duterte. All right. Rodrigo Duterte had a fairly good chance, and he said he wanted to do this. It's very plain. It's in the record. You can see him saying it any number of times. That he was going to institute a federal system, enact the BBL law, which had been languishing in the Congress, in the Philippine House, and the Senate as well. Various amendments were attached. It couldn't be passed, basically, because of the Mama Sapano massacre and the intense backlash that brought about. Right? Instead of fast-tracking the BBL's passage, Rodrigo Duterte, for any number of reasons, chose to prosecute his drug war with maximum force, maximum lethality. And the passage of the BBL was thus delayed. And this gave enough of a push for people within the MILF to defect. The MILF, because it could not deliver on the BBL, was discredited. Various family clans who did not like the leadership of Murad Ibrahim, for whatever reason, defected. One of them was this Maute clan. All right? There are a number of others, as we will see. Now, and that basically is what led to the Marawi crisis, which is over but not over, continuing but dissipated. There are any number of stories you could see on the internet for that issue. So, some more discussion of the role of the United States here. Okay. Very soon after the outbreak of the siege in Marawi City, you had the entrance of American Special Operations Forces into the battle space, by and large providing intelligence and also surveillance activities. This was of some embarrassment to President Duterte because the military commanders on the ground enacted this invitation to American Special Operations without informing President Duterte of their intention to do so beforehand. All right? This put a bit of a damper in his tilt away from the United States and towards China. And it reflects the profoundly continuous, deep structural power that the United States has over Philippine coercive institutions. More so the military than the police, but nevertheless, I think the military is the more important actor here. All right. Now again, the need is not merely Islamic, or the need to prosecute the war on terror, the need to contain Islamic extremism. That is the surface argument that American military commanders give you. The real intention, I would make this case, and we can discuss this if you like, is to maintain linkages with the Philippine military to make sure that military will not turn to China. It will be partners in the containment of a rising China in the Asian Pacific Rim. In other words, the Islamist argument is only part of the explanation at best. There is a much deeper and indeed more serious, if you want to call it that, reason for United States intervention here. All right. So the deep structures of American military power have remained in place well after martial law, well after Ferdinand Marcos, and indeed well after the end of the Cold War. And I think this entrance of U.S. Special Operations Forces is a very obvious indication of that. It's kind of just a tip. It's a tiny little spear tip, but it's the tip of a very big iceberg standing behind it. All right. Now, some meditations on the future. Again, referring to the work of Patricio Abinales, who's again the leading scholar on this topic, he basically feels that the Maute group will not be able to embed itself within southern Philippine Muslim society because the Islam of the southern Philippines is of a more syncretist nature. For example, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a matriarchy like the Minangkabau of West Sumatra, but you do see more space given to women, and generally there is an intense reaction, hostile reaction by Muslim men in the South to Islamists coming in from the Middle East and telling them how to handle their women. They don't like it. They don't like putting their own mothers in their place, so to speak. You know, mothers are very important in these cultures I'm talking about today. The role they have in dissipating clan feuds, the role they have in making various deals with regard to marriage, with regard to trade, and so on and so forth. So in his view, we can see this as a kind of ephemeral phenomenon. All right. However, if the Bangsamoro Basic Law is not passed and counter-terror operations expand from Marawi City to encompass the entirety of the ARMM, Maguindanao province in particular, I think the situation is going to deteriorate. And that is what's been said. The most recent news that I've kind of caught up on, at least this morning, is that the AFP intends to extend its operations into Maguindanao province and clear out all manifestations of Islamist terror by the end of the year. If that happens, Hashim Salamat would have died in vain, so to speak. So again, I very much wish I shared Patricio Abinales' optimism, but it very much depends on what happens in Manila. So, thank you.